years, since those jobs do not extend for eternity. But it's the most important piece of jobs legislation we could consider. I appreciated hearing from the senator from Utah about the jobs concern of his energy proposal. These are real jobs. They're immediate jobs. They're jobs that everybody understands, building our roads, highways, and bridges. These local construction jobs are not only important in and of themselves, but they also help maintain the transportation infrastructure that lowers the cost of goods and helps our economy across the board. We've had to close a bridge where I-95 crosses over the Blackstone River in Pawtucket. It is reopening, but in the meantime, people had to drive around 295, and that cost time and fuel for shippers and delay, and it was an economic cost. So this really is the real jobs bill that we can do something about, and it is pending right now in conference. So it's imperative not only that the conference get this bill done, but that they get it done as soon as possible. Why do I say that? Well, there was a deadline of March 31st to get a new bill done. And the House of Representatives, unfortunately, did not pass a highway bill by the March 31st deadline. So on the eve of the expiration of that deadline, they passed an extension, and we are operating under that and a subsequent extension right now. The effect of that is not good for jobs. State departments of transportation and the private sector companies that provide the services that rebuild our roads and highways can't make long-range plans when funding is based on short-term extensions. Particularly in this economy, our states, our counties, and the companies that do this business simply can't afford to extend themselves on contracts and on work where they don't know that the highway funding is going to be there to backstop them when it comes time to make the payments. So, in many instances, for many projects, a short-term extension actually requires the underlying construction project to be dropped. In Rhode Island, our State Department of Transportation, led by Transportation Director Michael Lewis, who is a very, very capable and experienced individual, they've shown me their list of 96 major projects that they plan to do this year. But because of the uncertainty here over the highway bill, because the conference has not produced a result yet, because we're still operating under the extension, he says that about 40 of those projects may have to be shelved. Because until we get the bill done, he can't count on federal funds being there to help pay for them. So every day, every week that goes by without a highway bill costs us jobs. It doesn't just postpone the jobs, it actually costs us jobs. The at-risk projects range from things as simple as lane striping to road repaving to major bridge repairs. What they all have in common is that each one of these transportation projects means jobs for the construction workers that build them, the engineers that design them, and the companies that supply the materials. It's not just me saying this. Standard & Poor's recently published a report warning us that unpredictable federal funding could stall our national transportation projects. I'll quote from the report. As construction season begins in the northern half of the country, this continuing uncertainty in funding could force states to delay projects rather than risk funding changes or political gridlock come July. They continue in another quote. Once a long-term authorization is approved, we believe it will provide an impetus for transportation agencies to reconsider high-priority projects that had been shelved because of lack of funding. But if the authorization is extended by even more continuing resolutions, such high-priority projects will remain in limbo. So as time goes by, jobs evaporate. Continuing delays in transportation funding are putting this year's construction season at risk and are making it impossible for states to keep their construction projects moving. So it is not enough that we pass a highway bill out of this conference. It is imperative that we pass it soon. There have been enough delays already. We were supposed to have gotten this done on March 31st, except that the House never actually passed a highway bill. The Senate bill, fortunately, provides a solid framework for action and for rapid action. This Senate transportation bill, called MAP 21, first off passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee last year. It passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee on a bipartisan basis, indeed, on a unanimous basis. There is not a lot that every member of the Environment and Public Works Committee agrees on. There is not a lot, frankly, that our chairman, Barbara Boxer, and our ranking member, Jim Inhofe, agree on. But we all agreed that this was an important piece of legislation and reported it out of the committee on a unanimous basis. Then the bill came to the floor. There were no fast tracks. There was no hide the ball. This bill spent 5 weeks on the Senate floor. There were a great number of amendments that were considered during that period of deliberation. I believe the total is that 40 were accepted either by vote or by agreement. And after that long, open, transparent, robust legislative process in which Republicans and Democrats both contributed, the bill passed with the strong bipartisan support of 75 senators. That's pretty unusual around here. MAP 21 is projected to save or create 1.9 million jobs. As I said, those are not jobs that last for eternity. The convention, I believe, is that they last for a year. 1.9 million jobs with the potential to create an additional million jobs through the increased investment in the TIFIA financing program. So a total of 2.9 million jobs. In Rhode Island, that means that the bill is expected to save or create up to 9,000 jobs. And if its provision for projects of national and regional significance is incorporated in the final bill, and if funding is provided through our appropriations process, that number actually goes up because some additional projects can be added that are overdue in Rhode Island for work. So MAP 21, the Senate highway bill, is a true compromise bill. It reflects the hard work of Chairman Boxer and Senator Inhofe, and it is a strong bipartisan signal from this body as to how our transportation bill what it should look like. Procedurally, the conference committee is reconciling this Senate bipartisan compromise bill with basically an empty envelope of a bill, a 90-day extension passed by the House with an authorization to conference and some controversial provisions thrown in, unfortunately, that will make things more difficult and slower to get done. And more difficult and slower is not good when you're talking about passing a highway bill and the construction season is already beginning to get underway. The most sensible action, and the one in the best interests of our country, the one in the best interests of our economy, the one in the best interests of our infrastructure, the one in the best interests of jobs in these construction projects, would be for the conference committee to report out the bipartisan Senate bill without a lot of controversial riders so that we can get a long-term reauthorization signed into law while there is still a full construction season ahead, and get hardworking Americans back to work rebuilding, as every American knows we need to do, rebuilding our nation's beat-up and decrepit transportation infrastructure. So I am pleased that the conference is off to a good start. I'm sorry that we had to wait this long to get to this point. It would be nice to have had this done on March 31st when the deadline came. But now that we are here, I urge all the conferees to come to a quick resolution that honors the extensive bipartisan work that went into the Senate bill that has gotten us to this point. With that, I yield the floor. And I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
President.
The senator from Alabama.
Madam President, I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I'm here today to speak, I believe, for the great majority of Americans who believe that the time is long overdue for the federal government to fulfill its commitment, its responsibility to end the lawlessness at our borders. Only once we do that can we put this matter, the deep frustrations that are occurring behind us, move our country forward in a positive and united way. Immigration security is especially important in these economic times. Illegal labor does, in fact, depress wages, makes it more difficult for out-of-work Americans to find good-paying jobs. Immigration security also is vital to stopping cartels who are creating violence around our borders and in our cities. The federal government has a duty to protect those living in communities which suffer every day from preventable drug and gang violence, and there's nothing compassionate about looking the other way when we can take concrete actions to make our schools and communities safer in every part of the country. There's nothing compassionate about a policy which makes it harder to protect immigrants who are in our country and Americans in our country from gang violence that is often starting at our border today. Unfortunately, instead of compelling sanctuary jurisdictions like the City of Chicago to cooperate with federal law enforcement officers, the administration has instead gone after those states who are trying to assist the federal government to reduce the lawlessness in our country. Under new guidelines, the Department of Homeland Security doesn't consider someone a priority, that individual deportation proceedings are closed and they're allowed to remain in the country. So far, the administration has granted this form of backdoor amnesty to almost 17,000 aliens illegally in the country, some of which are convicted of crimes. The administration has also been resistant to the popular E-Verify program, never once including it in any of its jobs or economic plans. ICE, the Customs and Enforcement Group, has also effectively ended worksite enforcement operations, meaning that employers can continue to hire illegal workers rather than out-of-work Americans. A determined president could take meaningful steps to stem the tide of illegality, and I have been encouraged by Governor Romney's commitments on this issue. This is something I've worked at for some time, and I am absolutely convinced there was consistent, smart, effective leadership and a commitment on behalf of this country to end the lawlessness. It can be done quicker, and with less difficulty than most people realize. For example, Governor Romney recounted the following conversation he had with a Border Patrol agent, and it's so similar to ones I've had with Mr. Bonner, who heads the Border Patrol Association. This is what they told him. This is what, as Governor Romney recounted it. When employers are willing to hire people who are here illegally, that's a magnet, and it draws people in. And sanctuary cities giving tuition breaks to the kids of illegal aliens. Those things have to be stopped. If we want to secure the border, we have to make sure we have a fence determining where the people are, enough agents to oversee it, and turn off that magnet. We can't talk about amnesty. We cannot give amnesty to those who have come here illegally. And that's what Governor Romney said he was told by the agents who have to deal with this every day and who try to do their job professionally. And I think that's correct. That's what they're telling me. That's what law enforcement officers have told me for some time. Another example of how our country is so out of control is this government's failure to fairly uphold the rule of law with regard to earned income tax credit. the Treasury Department, the United States Treasury Department's own Inspector General, who analyzes problems within the agency and issues reports, reported that in 2010, the Internal Revenue Service paid illegal aliens a staggering $4.2 billion in child tax credits for dependents that don't even live in the country. And this has been going on for years. It cannot continue. It must be stopped. It can't be delayed, the fixing of it. The Treasury IG report states, quote, although the law prohibits aliens residing without authorization in the United States from receiving most federal public benefits, an increasing number of these individuals are filing tax returns claiming the additional child tax credit, a refundable tax credit intended for working families. The payment of federal funds through this tax credit benefit appears to provide an additional incentive for aliens to enter, reside, and work in the United States without authorization, which directly contradicts federal law and policy to remove such incentives. Close quote. And that's the Inspector General of the U.S. Treasury Department, not my language. And, of course, that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. How could it be otherwise? In the press report from Indiana, one of the illegal aliens admitted his address was used this year to file tax returns by 4 other undocumented workers who don't even live there. Those 4 workers claimed 20 children live inside that one residence. And as a result, the Internal Revenue Service sent the illegal immigrants tax refunds totaling $29,608. Government, a tax credit is not a tax deduction. It's a direct payment, direct transfer of wealth through the tax system to an individual. $29,608. The Treasury report, the Inspector General stated, quote, millions of people are seeking this tax credit who, we believe, are not entitled to it. We have made recommendations to the Internal Revenue Service as to how they could address this issue, and they have not taken sufficient action, in our view, to solve the problem. Well, that's not acceptable. $4 billion is a great deal of money. $4 billion a year is about $10 million a day. That's what they found so far that are receiving this one benefit illegally. And people are wondering, we've got having hot tubs in Las Vegas, giving $500 million loans to failed Solyndra companies. What are we doing here in Washington? So I say, Madam President, it is time to end this. I would note that the House of Representatives in their legislation has voted to end this. And so it's now time to see what this Senate will do. We need to act to end it also. So it seems every few years, I've been in the Senate for now 15-plus years, and we've begun to see, being on the Judiciary Committee, we've seen the debate over immigration move forward, and sometimes encouragingly and sometimes discouragingly. But every few years it seems that the Washington masters who have willfully and deliberately failed to follow through on consistent promises that we would end immigration illegality began to discuss some form of amnesty. They continued to incentivize the illegality but remain unwilling to take the necessary steps, not impossible, steps that can be done to secure the border on behalf of all citizens. For example, just this week, my good friend and able Senator Durbin, said that the DREAM Act is a bill that says if you graduate from high school and you have no serious problems when it comes to convictions or moral issues, and you either complete service in the military or 2 years in college, we will put you on a path to becoming legal and becoming a citizen, close quote. But we've examined that legislation. In its most recent version, it would really, in effect, grant amnesty to millions of people here at illegality, regardless of whether they go on to finish high school, finish college, or serve in the military. That's what the legislation does, the one that Senator Durbin has previously supported. And the bill is certainly not limited to children. It would apply to illegal immigrants who are in their 30s now, and because the bill has no cap, no limit, no sunset, no ending, would allow people to remain eligible for the rest of their lives at any age to claim this benefit. And once they're naturalized, those granted DREAM Act amnesty would then have the right to legally petition for entry into the United States their family members, including their adult brothers and sisters, and the parents who caused their illegal presence in the United States to begin with, easily tripling the number of green card holders. And this is a big issue. We need to be careful about these things. We need to consider what we're doing here. So the bill's provisions are so broad, they are open to those who have even multiple misdemeanor criminal convictions. That could include drunk driving and certain sexual offenses. But the bill goes further, offering safe harbor protection to those here illegally, those who have pending deportation proceedings against them. Those deportation proceedings have to stop, even when the individual might propose a risk to Americans when that deportation may be based on pending serious crimes. This is especially dangerous because the safe harbor would also apply to those from terror-prone regions in the Middle East. In fact, the DREAM Act altogether ignores the lessons of 9/11, going so far as to open eligibility to those who previously defrauded immigration authorities, as did many of those 9/11 hijackers. So, you say, well, Jeff, what are we going to do? What can we do here? You say no, but we need to have a plan. We need to do something. Please, colleagues, think this through. The way forward for our country, the right way, the way to end the bitterness and develop common solutions for all residents is first secure the border, as Americans have asked this Congress and this government to do year after year after year after year. And this Congress and this administration has failed to do so. We must rebuild the trust, that trust with the American people before other actions are taken. How commonsensical is that? People have a right to believe that we will promise enforcement and give amnesty. That's been the pattern. We give the amnesty, but don't do the enforcement. That's why people are upset with Washington. Why shouldn't they be? It's gone on for several decades. It's gone on since I've been in the Senate every year. We've got to follow through on the commitments that have been made to the public to do what we promised. It is time to end the lawlessness, not surrender to it. With determined leadership from the White House, support in the Congress, we can, in just a few years, I'm totally convinced, solve the problem at our border, restore the rule of law, put an end to the border violence, create a sane, just, and lawful system of immigration for America, a system that we can be proud of, a system which befits a nation as great as ours. Madam President, I thank the Chair. Would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Thank you.